We just wrote an if then else condition to determine the next birthday. However, I think it's worth looking at this syntax in a little bit more detail because hidden in here are very important lessons about Python programming. So let's look at this closely. First thing first, let's look at the overall structure of this. In fact, as we saw, previously, it is very similar to what happens in Scratch. So we have if a logical condition, which was in Scratch case was like a diamond. There's no then, but there's this colon, and then we have the if statements, else we have these statements. So fundamentally, this is very similar, like I said, to the if then else there. However, let's look at this a little bit more closely. First, let's start with the logical condition. Now, logical condition here, just like Scratch, there can be many. So there is like a bunch of operators here. Now we can have, we had, for example, in Scratch greater than, less than, and then equal to. We could have complicated conditions. It's exactly the same here. There are some syntax points which we'll see a little later, but we can also have, for example, things like greater than equal to, less than equal to, and so on and so forth. We can also extend these by saying, okay, if this condition 1 and condition 2, condition 1 or condition 2, we will see all of this as well. There's a not block as well. So everything is equal, but the only, everything is actually the same. The only thing to keep in mind is that we have to be careful about what we are comparing. In this example here, for example, we compared two date time objects because, it's possible. Basically it tells one which one appeared first, which one appeared later. But in general, just remember the basic rule, that simple rule, which we actually use in our day-to-day life as well. Do not do an apple to orange comparison. So whatever you're comparing, it has to be logical, it has to be sensible, and then you get the meaningful answer. Next thing, notice that so we've covered this 1 and 2. Number 3 here is this colon. Now think of it this way, that this colon is a part of the syntax. Now you can think of it as then. It's like basically if something then. But remember that even on this else, we will need this colon. Number 4, and this part is probably the most important here, is this thing called indentation. Now remember, in the past I've told you that you can leave as many lines in the code as you want. It's not going to matter. However, the moment you give a horizontal spacing, or let's say a tab, then it starts to matter because that is seen as an indentation. Notice what's going on here. We are saying if then do something. Basically, this set of statements gets executed only if this condition is true, which means, kind of logically speaking, this is at a different hierarchical level compared to this, and hence we do an indentation. Same way for else, this set of statements gets executed only if we are coming here, and hence we indent this again. Now let's see this in our code a little bit more carefully. We did this without making too much, let's say display of it, but now it's very clear. You can see that everything is at this level of indentation, but the moment I look at this statements, it is one level inside. And the way I did this is basically, if I did it here, it automatically indents. But for some reason, if it's not indented, then I must use a tab. Please do not use a space because that will cause a lot of problem, right? In fact, you can set this in the settings, but just keep it simple. Just use a tab there, and make sure this is identically indented. Also, the final point there is that there are no brackets. Now, this you will appreciate better if you have come from some other programming language, text-based. Notice the only brackets here I'm putting are because of the print or because of this date time, but nothing fundamentally about the if then else that is causing a bracket. Now, many other languages require you to write the if statements inside the set of brackets, else statements inside another set of brackets. When you nest them, it can get quite messy to keep track of what those brackets are doing. Python, as we know, is supposed to be readable, is meant to be readable. So it's kind of very simple. And if this, okay, then I do all this indented, I come to else, and then do all of this. However, there's a very interesting point here and worth mentioning. How do I know that this loop has actually ended? Notice, because there's no bracket, so there's no clear visible indication where this has ended. In fact, the answer really is the if else condition ends when the indentation ends. And I'm going to show you, this in two examples. I'm just going to, let's say, make an example here. Let's say I say print, say, your next birthday, birthday, and I, let's say do this, and there maybe I'll put an end of, let's say, end equals to, say, equals, and with space, and then I go and print, let's say, the next b day. So now Notice I'm going to show you two scenarios. In one scenario, I am putting it back at the normal indentation. Notice it's got aligned with the if, I, and the E here, which means it's back at the regular indentation. Now, what this means is that this is no longer a part of the if then else condition, because else everything was indented and now I have broken that indentation. So now this will not get printed. This will get printed all the time regardless of what is going on here, right? Because it's really not part of the if then else loop. So if I, let's say, ran this, it asks me what's your, which year were you born in. So I say 19, let's say 1988, say 2 and 3 just for the sake of it. You were born on Wednesday, next birthday will be next year, because 3rd of February is indeed next year. And when next birthday from this statement comes out to be 2023, whatever, 3rd February, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, let's say I had indented these lines as well. Now, this is very, very interesting. Notice this gap here will get ignored, but because of this indentation, these two lines have now become a part of the else condition. And remember, we are dealing with the T junction, so either we go here or we go here. We can't do both, which means that, let's say I came into this condition where, let's say I gave it, a birthday which is in 1988. I say, for example, 12 and say 12. Now I know that my next birthday will be this year. So this statement got printed because I came into here, but I did not see my next birthdays being printed, which was this statement. And the reason is because now the interpreter thinks that these statements are lumped along with, these statements because of the indentation, and hence I'm going to do this only if the else condition were to come true. So fix this. Well, as I just showed you, make sure the indentation is correct, make sure you understand where the loop has to end, and accordingly indent this. Now, in fact, very interestingly, we can kind of see this happening also from, our good old friend Scratch. I keep going back to Scratch because it's just so powerful. uh, Notice when I indent it earlier here, I do not indent the print statement here. I mean, this statements are a little bit different, but you get the idea. It's like saying the if then else gets over and then the print comes outside the if then else. On the other hand, if I indent this statement along with it, knowingly or unknowingly, I have moved my print inside the else. Now, this is actually a very important point. A lot of times students, especially in the beginning, are not careful about this and they get extremely confused as the code becomes larger. But keep this in mind that it's exactly, what's happening. If I have my print inside this, then it's become part of the else. In fact, visually also, if you think about it, and this is somewhat coincidental, that in here also there's a kind of indentation going on. That's just visual artifact of Scratch. But remember, indentation is important. That's how statements are logically arranged. So the moment indentation ends, the if then else condition also ends. Keep Do keep this in mind. You will need this for your as you program more and more, you realize how important this is. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.